In the beginning, it never feels like a crime. It feels like background noise. A rise in food prices, a rent increase, a paycheck that somehow buys less each month. But beneath that quiet hum is the sound of something breaking, something collapsing, something being stolen in real time. Inflation doesn't walk through the front door wearing a mask. It seeps under it, invisible, patient, engineered to be misunderstood. And by the time people realize what's happening, the damage is already irreversible. Savings evaporate, retirements dissolve, generations of work turn to dust. Entire nations wake up poorer than they were the night before. Look at every economic tragedy of the past century, and you will find the same silent detonation at the center of it. A currency imploding from the inside out. In Weimar Germany, a wheelbarrow of cash couldn't buy a loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe, billion-dollar notes became worthless souvenirs. In Lebanon, families watched their life savings disintegrate in 24 months. The pattern is universal. When trust in money collapses, everything else follows. Order, stability, dignity. Inflation is not just numbers trending upward on a government chart. It is a psychological weapon, a slow-motion earthquake, a controlled demolition of the middle class. Because unlike theft committed in the open, inflation disguises itself as policy, as stimulus, as economic management. The thieves wear suits, not masks. They smile for cameras while draining the lifeblood out of the very people they claim to protect. And while the media calls it temporary, households feel the truth tightening around them. The grocery bill that jumps 20% but never returns. The rent that climbs like a staircase with no landing. The silent knowledge that your money buys less today than it did yesterday, and that this erosion is not a glitch. It is the system functioning exactly as designed. Inflation is the only form of theft that punishes the responsible. Those who save, who plan, who hold on to the future, they lose the most. Their discipline becomes the fuel burned to keep an over-leveraged system alive just a little longer. The message is clear. Don't save, don't plan, don't build independence. Consume, borrow, stay dependent, stay predictable. And while ordinary people drown in rising prices, another group rises with them. Every percentage point of inflation channels wealth upward, away from workers, toward institutions that create money out of thin air and loan it back at interest. They grow stronger from the same force that weakens everyone else. Inflation is not a side effect of the machine. It is the machine. But perhaps the darkest truth is this. Collapse rarely announces itself. It accelerates quietly, then suddenly. A currency fails slowly for years, until one day, it fails all at once. Tens of millions are left staring at bank accounts that mean nothing. Peter that holds no value. A system that no longer pretends to protect them. This is the opening chapter of every financial disaster. A society waking up inside a burning house, smoke filling the hallways, yet convinced the heat is just transitory. Inflation is not a warning. It is the fire. Across every era of human history, inflation appears not as an accident, but as a recurring signature, a fingerprint left behind wherever power concentrates and accountability evaporates. Long before modern economists gave it sanitized names, rulers understood the temptation. When you control the money supply, you control the people who depend on it. And when the treasury runs dry, you don't tighten your belt. You simply debase the currency and hope the public doesn't notice. The Roman Empire was among the first to perfect this silent art of extraction. For centuries, their silver denarius carried the weight of trust, a promise stamped in metal. But as wars multiplied and emperors chased grander ambitions, silver became too expensive and discipline too inconvenient. So they diluted the coinage, replacing precious metal with cheaper alloys, while keeping the same imperial face on the front. The public saw a familiar image. What they didn't see was their purchasing power dissolving behind it. Inflation didn't just weaken the currency, it weakened the empire itself, feeding corruption, eroding loyalty, and accelerating Rome's long descent into fragmentation. Centuries later, the same pattern resurfaced. During the World Wars, governments across Europe quietly expanded their money supply to fund battles they couldn't afford. Printing presses roared in the background, while politicians assured citizens that sacrifice was patriotic and temporary. But nothing about inflation is temporary. Once unleashed, it becomes a permanent scar. Britain, France, Germany all watched the purchasing power of their citizens collapse while debts were inflated away behind closed doors. The 20th century introduced a new twist in the pattern, the sophistication of deceit. In 1971, the United States severed its ties to gold, ending the last major constraint on government spending. Overnight, money transformed from a tangible store of value into a promise backed only by political will. And political will, history shows, is the weakest foundation imaginable. From that moment on, inflation stopped being a cyclical phenomenon and became structural, built into the architecture of the global economy. Every historical episode follows the same three-beat rhythm. Power expands, currency weakens, citizens pay the price. Empires dilute their coins. Nations print their way out of crises. Central banks engineer controlled inflation that somehow always spirals out of control. And through it all, a single truth endures. Those who create the money benefit first, while those who earn it benefit last, if at all. Inflation is not a modern curse. It is an ancient strategy reborn in modern clothes. A recurring weapon wielded by elites who understand that taking one coin at a time will always provoke rebellion. But erasing value slowly, invisibly, will not. No thief in history has been as patient, as subtle, or as consistently successful as the architects of monetary decay. The pattern has repeated for 2,000 years, and every time it returns, it grows darker. History doesn't repeat itself in straight lines. It repeats in echoes, patterns that ripple forward, disguising themselves as progress, while quietly retracing the steps of fallen empires. And when you place the past and the present side by side, the illusion of modern stability disintegrates. What looked like isolated events becomes a mirror. What looked like coincidence becomes choreography. Today's economy, with all its digital gloss and algorithmic confidence, is walking the same path as ancient Rome, wartime Britain, and every nation that believed it could outsmart the mathematics of money. The mechanisms have evolved, but the motive has not. When governments spend more than they earn, and when central banks intervene to stabilize markets, the pressure always builds in the same place, the currency itself. Not visibly, not immediately, but inevitably. Just look at the last 20 years. In 2008, the world witnessed the first large-scale experiment in quantitative easing. Trillions of dollars created not through labor or production, but through keystrokes. Politicians called it a rescue. Economists called it stimulus. But history had already given it a name: debasement. Rome clipped its coins. We expanded balance sheets. Different tools, same outcome. Value diluted from the inside. Then came 2020, a global shock used as justification for an even larger monetary expansion. More money was printed in a single year than in multiple decades combined. Markets celebrated, asset prices soared, but households felt something else, the floor shifting beneath them. The cost of living rising faster than wages, faster than logic, faster than any official explanation could conceal. The parallel with Weimar Germany tightened not in the scale of printing, but in the psychology of denial. Leaders insisted it was temporary. Weimar leaders said the same. The similarities grow sharper when you map the timeline. Before every historical collapse, there is a period of engineered optimism. a belief that authorities have mastered the system, that the old rules of economics no longer apply. Rome believed endless expansion would fund itself. Britain believed wartime printing could be reversed. America believed abandoning gold would bring flexibility without consequence. And today, the world believes central banks can conjure infinite liquidity without eroding the foundation beneath us. The graphs tell the same story. Money supply curves bending upward at the exact same angle seen before every major inflationary spiral. Debt rising faster than productivity. Asset bubbles inflating while real wages stagnate. A growing distance between financial reality and lived reality, the same gap that preceded every historical reckoning. But the most chilling parallel is not numerical, it is social. As currencies weaken, societies fracture. Inequality widens, distrust festers. The middle class, the stabilizing force of every civilization, begins to disappear. Rome saw bread riots. Weimar saw political extremism. Lebanon saw mass protests. And today, the symptoms are emerging again. Anger, polarization, disillusionment with institutions that once claimed legitimacy. We are not watching a new story. We are living inside an old one, retold with modern lighting. Every civilization that tampered with its currency believed it was different. Every one of them was wrong. There comes a moment in every crisis when the veil slips, when the chaos that looked accidental suddenly reveals intent. Inflation has always been framed as a natural force, a byproduct of markets, a side effect of complex systems. But nothing about its mechanics is accidental. It is engineered, directed, weaponized. And once you trace the flow of money to its source, the culprit becomes unmistakable. Behind every inflationary spiral stands a coalition of convenience. Governments that cannot restrain their spending, and central banks that cannot resist the temptation to manufacture liquidity. Together, they form a partnership built on extraction. One demands more money, the other creates it. And the cost of their alliance is silently transferred onto the public through rising prices, shrinking savings, and a currency that decays year by year. This is the heart of the deception. Inflation benefits the architects long before it harms the citizens. When new money is created, it enters the economy at the top through banks, corporations, and government programs. Those closest to the faucet get to spend it while it still holds value. By the time it reaches ordinary workers, the value has already been diluted. This is not economics. This is hierarchy. A system designed to reward proximity to power. The elites understand the sequence perfectly. First, they create the money. Then, they deploy it into assets they already control. Finally, they watch those assets rise in price, a rise triggered by the very money they injected. When your wages fall behind inflation, it isn't a miscalculation. It's the plan. Politicians thrive in inflationary environments because inflation hides the true cost of their decisions. Instead of raising taxes, a move that provokes immediate backlash, they simply let the currency absorb the impact. Voters blame the economy, not the hands that drained it. Budgets balloon, deficits metastasize, and through it all, the public is told that everything is under control. Central banks, meanwhile, present themselves as guardians of stability. But no institution that can create money without limit can ever be neutral. Every dollar printed redistributes wealth. Every stimulus package widens the divide. Every interest rate decision tilts the playing field toward those already in command. Stability is the costume. Control is the motive. And then there are the financial institutions, the silent beneficiaries of monetary distortion. Cheap money allows them to leverage, speculate, acquire, and expand, while households struggle to keep up with basic necessities. The same inflation that crushes families becomes fuel for corporate empires. The same policies that empty savings accounts inflate executive bonuses. When you step back far enough, the design becomes undeniable. Inflation is a siphon, extracting value from millions to enrich a few. A tax without legislation, a theft without fingerprints. For decades, the public has been taught to blame themselves. Poor budgeting, insufficient income, bad luck. But the truth is colder. The system was never built to preserve their wealth. It was built to harvest it, slowly, silently, and systematically. And the ones pulling the levers know exactly what they're doing. Because inflation doesn't just steal money, it steals power, transferring it upward, consolidating it, locking it away. The real crime isn't rising prices, it's the architecture behind them. Inflation always feels inevitable, like weather, like aging, like some invisible tide we are forced to endure. But inevitability is the illusion that keeps the system alive. The truth is sharper. Inflation is a trap only for those who walk through it blind. Once you understand its mechanics, its motives, and its predictable cycles, you stop being a victim and start becoming someone the system can no longer quietly drain. Every major inflationary era ends in the same way, with a reckoning. A point where the currency can no longer absorb the weight placed upon it, where public trust fractures, and where the facade of control crumbles. Governments promise stability. Central banks promise soft landings. Experts promise that this time is different. But underneath those reassurances lies an unstoppable math. Debt rising faster than production. Money created faster than value. Confidence evaporating faster than explanations can replace it. And yet, collapse is never the full story, because every monetary failure also marks the beginning of a new cycle. A transfer of power not only upward, but sideways, toward those who see what others refuse to see. In every era, a small group anticipates the breakdown and steps outside the blast radius. They shift into assets that cannot be printed. They build resilience in a system designed to punish it. They make themselves ungovernable by refusing to hold wealth in a form that can be quietly stolen. Gold survived Rome. Land survived every war. Scarce assets survived every currency collapse. And today, digital stores of value have joined that lineage. Tools not of speculation, but of escape. The inevitability of inflation is not the inevitability of defeat. It is the inevitability of change. And within that change lies an opportunity that only becomes visible to those willing to confront the uncomfortable truth. The system will not save you. It was never designed to. But individuals who learn to navigate the storm can emerge from it stronger, freer, and far less vulnerable than before. Because once you see inflation as a strategy, not a mistake, you stop waiting for policymakers to fix it. You start building your own shield. You study monetary cycles, not headlines. You invest in assets that resist dilution. You cultivate independence in a world built on dependency. And slowly, the trap loses its power. The siphon breaks. The theft stops working. The elites thrive when the public believes collapse is unthinkable. But history rewards those who quietly prepare for the moment when the unthinkable becomes undeniable. Inevitability cuts both ways. If decline is inevitable, so is awakening. If theft is inevitable, so is resistance. If the system is designed to drain you, you can design a life it cannot touch. Inflation may be the most powerful form of theft, but awareness, sharp, disciplined, uncompromising, is the first form of freedom. And once a population learns to protect itself, no empire, no bank, no government can steal from it in silence again.